say welcome and thank you so much to all of you for joining today. We may have people popping on. One of the traditions here in Pittsburgh following the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue is to remember the 11 people who were taken from us that day through study and to continue the Jewish ritual of sort of door to door, carrying from generation to generation the wisdoms and the teachings, and do that in the honor of people who are not here. And so on this day, we have Rabbi Alicia Harris, who's going to lead us in a teaching. And we have people from our community here in Pittsburgh who have felt the impacts of this attack. We also have our good friend Hannah Kay, who will be reciting and honoring us with the Kaddish D'Rabbanan today from Poway. And we are just so grateful to have you all here tonight. Today, we're in the middle of the day here. So we do this in memory of Joyce Feinberg, Rich Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, Bernice and Sylvan Simon, Dan Stein, Irving Younger, and Mel Wax. And so we ask everybody to hold them in our hearts as we learn and as we carry forward words of Torah for the betterment of all of us and our communities. So today we are here with Rabbi Alicia Harris, and we are going to be learning about the Shemitah every 7 years, what our tradition can teach us about rest and resilience in the face of grief and trauma and overwhelm. So Rabbi Harris is the spiritual leader of Congregation Shir Tikva in Troy, Michigan, which is a Reform Renewal Jewish community in the Detroit area. Congregation Shir Tikva is innovative yet traditional and prides itself on being warm, welcoming, and inclusive and a diverse congregation. Today we were just talking that the Sunday school was supposed to go do service in people's homes by helping out, which I love. So that sort of says a little bit about the type of congregation. Rabbi Harris began her service there in July of 2020, right in the heart of the pandemic, and is a member of the Michigan Board of Rabbis and Women's Rabbinic Network and the Commission on Social Action for Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. Detroit Jews for Justice, as well as part of Troy Interfaith Group and the Interfaith Council of Metro Detroit. Rabbi Harris was ordained at the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati, Ohio, from which she also holds a master's degree in Hebrew letters and where she was a rabbinic fellow for 6 years. Rabbi Harris earned a Bachelor's of Arts of Religious Studies and Political Science at the University of Pittsburgh, hometown. After undergrad, she worked at Temple Sinai, also from our hometown here, for 2 years, which helped to solidify her decision to go to rabbinical school. Her parents still reside in Oakland, and she is very proud to be a Pittsburgher. So thank you again for joining, and I will turn it over to you, Rabbi Alicia.
Oh, thank you so much, Maggie. It's such an honor to be here studying with all of you today. As those of you who know me know well that I am very proud to have Pittsburgh in my roots. And this event on 10/27 shaped my rabbinical experience and a lot of my rabbinical school experience in so many ways, as it has shaped all of our lives. And I'm just so honored to be doing this with all of you. So I'm thrilled you're all here. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to start because there's not that many of us this morning or this afternoon. I am going to offer that we can have a more of a discussion-based situation. Of course, Bart and Judy know this about me well. I love to hear your thoughts. I will do my best to make sure everybody gets a chance to say what they want to say, and also that I'll be able to get, just keep yourselves on mute. And if you've got questions, you can put them in the chat. And if we need to, we'll figure it out. But I'm going to go through what I've put together, and hopefully you'll have thoughts about this too. I just want to also acknowledge that, we're looking at the Kristallnacht anniversary too, which is as we hold all of these things together. One of the things that my people hear me say all the time is we are containers for grief, and it is our responsibility to enlarge that container so we can hold joy and pain and sorrow and everything together. That's a big thing for me. So I'm really grateful to be here to be a part of this with you. So I'm going to start sharing my, here we go. Here we go. slideshow. There we are. So, one of the things that Maggie and I, she originally asked me to do this, talked about a lot is the idea of Jewish time. What is Jewish time? Why do we have it? What does it mean? And also, what can we learn from it? I like to say that I think as Jews, we sort of have the market cornered on the best way to grieve. I mean, to be fair, I don't have any other experiences in any other cultures or religions, but I do think that we have really found a way to give ourselves the space and time that we need when we are grieving. And this is no different. We're talking about Shemitah because it's been 7 years since this shooting. And what 7 years gives us in terms of our tradition and our history is a lot. So I thought you know, we would look at all of those things together. I'm going to just keep my speaker notes on. You can't see the speaker notes though, right? Or can you see them? No, you can't. Great. Oh, yay. Figured it out. Technology did it. Okay, so the first question we have to ask is what is Shemitah? And which all of you may know something about. Shemitah is the practice of, oh, no, you can't see,
Well,
Maggie.
now it's not advancing.
Oh, okay. That's great. This one? Okay, so that's interesting. Reset. Here we go. May need to stop this. That's fine.
And then restart it. Yeah.
Sorry, my bad, everybody. This is, if you know Shir Tikva, you would know that this is appropriate for our experiences, which are there's always some technical something in nature. So I'm so glad that it hasn't changed. That's great. Okay, let's try again here. All right. How about now? We good? Okay. All right, so what is Shemitah? Shemitah is the Torah's practice of radical rest and release for the land, for the community, and for ourselves. It's first introduced in the Torah portion of Mishpatim, which is an Exodus. Mishpatim literally means laws or customs or codes, really, of how to live our lives. So this is a code of, it's a quick one-liner of like every 7 years you will release people, but it comes right after they are given the revelation at Sinai. The people are given the revelation at Sinai, so it's really an important piece of receiving revelation, what it means to receive it. It's everywhere, but it's every 7 years we talk about this idea that here we go. When you enter the land, which meant Israel or whatever God was giving the people, observing a Shabbat, a Sabbath to Adonai. For 6 years you may sow, prune, and harvest, but in the seventh year the land shall have a complete rest. A Shabbat of Adonai, the land's produce shall be free for you, your servants, your strangers, your cattle, and the wild beast. Right? So Shemitah is this idea that there is a built-in cycle for resting the land, letting it lay fallow, which is complicated now because we have Shemitah years, but also there's Shemitah, there's ways that people have, of course, as we love a loophole. So how do you rotate the different plots to have them on different Shemitah cycles so that you make sure that you can always still grow and produce? The idea here, of course, being that like everybody should rest, right? The way that the Torah talks about this, it's not, oh, some rest and some don't rest. It's everybody rests. So that's what we're looking at here. It is throughout the Torah, I think one of the most important pieces, and it gives us this idea of the cyclical nature of, first of all, of agricultural life, of being in community with other people, and also the idea of giving space for even the land to rest means that we understand the importance of nature. So one of the things that I did while I was preparing for this is I went to the Hazon Shemitah source book. Hazon is, they do so much incredible work on food insecurity and land, but they put out in 2021 this this material that's like full of all of the resources where Shemitah exists in the Torah, and gives us the chance to read through all of it. So if you're interested in more resources, these are just a few. Go there. It's incredible. I will say that the other piece of Shemitah that we have to sort of acknowledge is the Yovel. The Yovel, or the Jubilee year, which is every 49 years, which is 7 times 7. We love a number. Uh, is the idea that, like, not only do all of these things happen, you take a rest, your debt is let go of, you're free, all of the people are now freed. Everything sort of starts over in year 49. It's not just, oh, your debts are forgiven. It's you are freed, your people are freed, everybody's free. So it's a really big moment, and it comes in this cycle. So what I'm curious for you all is, have you observed a Shemitah year? What does Shemitah mean to you? Or does, like, because we're not an agrarian society anymore, it may not uh, land in the same way. But I think there have been organizations that are doing some really important and unique work with understanding why we need this rest. So I'm curious about what your Shemitah experience has been, if you have, if you want to share, which you're welcome to do. Unmute yourselves and share if you'd like, or not, and that's just fine too.
Well, and I guess I'll start also by saying this, that I think that I marvel at the idea that we think of the land as something that needed to rest in the Torah. That was actually designated, and that there is a sense of all living things and all growing things having to find rest. So I don't farm anything. I'm not even good at growing anything that lives
Same,
inside or outside
same,
of my
same,
house.
same, same. Mhm.
But I do think that the idea that we know that there's regeneration of a lot of our cells at 7 years, that allergies can be developed and grown out of in 7 year cycles,
Mhm.
and that there is sort of this idea that the 7 years is not just arbitrary, and somehow it actually matters. So I've thought a lot about that in my own life, of thinking about what growth looks like and how to acknowledge growth, and also how to take a pause from it.
And science really just is like, they just discovered this in the last 10 or 15 years, that, like, our cells literally regenerate. So every 7 years are a time, like on the cellular level, we are different. I mean, what I know about cells is the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, because that's what we learned in freshman year biology when we made cakes about it. But like that's that is incredible that our bodies follow this type of cycle too. Thank you for bringing that up, Maggie. I'm so glad you said something. Um, so one of the things that it might come across, that Shemitah seems like an economic policy. Like, okay, well, you're gonna free all your slave, or you're gonna, pay back all the debts. You're gonna do this, moving the lands and making sure things seems fallow. But it's like a spiritual wisdom. It's a piece of spiritual wisdom. It's not just this idea. What in the Torah, it's like, okay, here's how you do this. Here's the cows that are free, and here's the this, and you don't milk them, and this is there. All those things are in there, but this is a spiritual experience. And so what we're seeing is that rest is built into our Jewish tradition. Rest exists. And I'm wondering, of course, if you're thinking about the other ways in which rest exists in our spiritual tradition, because, of course, Shemitah, as we hit the seventh year, we're not, it's impossible to ask us to be free of grief, right? It's impossible to ask us to, lay down our burdens completely. One of the things that I'm sure I mentioned it at Shabbat on Friday night, which Bart and Judy could tell you for sure, is that, like, it is not our responsibility to let go of things. It's our responsibility to build our container around the things that we hold, right? And to understand that we are responsible for carrying that along with the other things that are happening in our lives, right? So as we build our containers and carry this more, the idea of 7 years of Shemitah being this moment in time, I don't think it's fair to ask us to put down the grief of 1027. I can't. I feel that grief pretty deeply. The grief of losing our people, what that feels like. So I think instead, thinking about the Shemitah year as a way to expand our container, I literally, have you seen that? I'm gonna share this photo, which I just love. This is from my friend Dan Slipikoff, Rabbi Dan Slipikoff. But this idea that people tend to believe that grief shrinks over time. But I actually think what happens is that grief is grief and we expand. Like I feel like I can feel the lead ball in this picture and I can feel the container growing. So that to me feels like a freedom yeah,
We can't see your picture.
of course you can't. Why would you be able to see it if you wanted to? Why? Okay, hold please. Uh, this is really those like good old days of what do you now you can see my grief picture?
Yeah, we
Okay,
can see it. And
perfect.
then you want to
Great.
probably go to slide to view slides.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem with the view slides is then I can't see my notes. Okay, so there you go. Right? So this is what I'm thinking about. Like this idea that this lead ball always exists and then we expand. I can literally feel the glass, when they blow glass, it's like molten lava, right? And it's kind of sticky and then you blow in air and it grows over time. That's what I see here. So I'm curious about other examples of Jewish rest that are built into our tradition. Other examples of how we can use time to help us understand or grow in some way around our grief. I think the things that probably you are thinking of, the way that I'm thinking of, Shabbat, right? That's like a pretty, that's a seven also, to be clear. Shabbat, I'm thinking also of the grief traditions, like the way that we grieve around a funeral, which we'll talk about in a minute. Any other things that are coming to mind, space and time wise?
Hi, Alicia. Um,
Oh, hi, Becca. Becca and I went to undergrad at Pitt together, so we've known each other for a long time. So she also feels connected.
so glad to be here and be learning from you.
Thank you.
I've been seeing a lot of people treating the month of Cheshvan as an opportunity to rest and kind of recover from the hubbub of the holidays, but also take it as an opportunity to take in all the messages and intentions we learned over the holidays.
Mm, I love that. Cheshvan, of course, every rabbi's favorite month is the month that we're currently in that has no Jewish holidays in it. So it's it's actually called Mar Heshvan, which means bitter Heshvan because it's literally there's no holidays. But I would not I would say quiet Heshvan is my favorite. Totally true. The other thing I'm thinking of is the Omer, counting the Omer. We count these days from the second day of Pesach until Shavuot when we receive the Torah. That also, by the way, seven, all built around the sevens. If we want to go into numerology, that's a whole other thing, but like all built around 7 days of the week, 7 weeks of the year, 49 days in total, counting the time. Jewish time between this cleaning and the end and receiving, and what that means for us also. So Shabbat, of course, right? This this quote, okay, so Abraham Joshua Heschel, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who I'm sure you know from Marching with Dr. King, um, he's the person who really said, I was praying with my feet. That was his quote. And he wrote this book it's called The Sabbath. And it's not called the Shabbat. My computer automatically corrects Sabbath to Shabbat now because that's what happens when AI becomes smart on your Jewish professional life. But it's called The Sabbath, and it's a small book it's so dense. It's perhaps one of the densest books I've ever read. But this bit really, to me, I think is the answer to this question in so many ways. Judaism is a religion of time, aiming at the sanctification of time. Then he talks about how we don't have these sort of great sites. The Sabbaths are our great cathedrals. Jewish ritual may be characterized as an architecture of time. Most of its observances, the Sabbath, the new moon, the festivals, the sabbatical, and the Jubilee years, all depend on a certain hour or season of the year. So, as we know, we don't just celebrate Passover whenever, we do it when we're supposed to do it because it says it in the Torah, right? We don't our holidays are all built around this idea that like we have this Jewish time built into us, right? And if that's the case, then it is our responsibility to at least try to understand what that time gives us and why we need it and use it as a part of our everyday rituals. So to me, Shabbat is like the obvious answer, right? We did our Tat Shabbat yesterday morning, and we did the grape juice and the challah. We sang the dinosaur song. If you've got little kids right now, you know that song, the Shabbat dinosaur song. But it's a moment of pause, right? And even though Shabbat doesn't look perhaps for all of us the same, it's literally built into our tradition to follow if we are really talking about where it comes from, the idea of B'Tselem Elohim, the idea that we are created in the image of God. If God rested, so do we, right? And Shabbat does not need to be earned. Shabbat comes whether or not we are ready for Shabbat to be here. And for some of us, that means halachically, like we are, at the last minute fixing up, doing the plate and the whole, like cooking, whatever it is. For some of us, it means getting to shul on time, right at, whatever time shul services start at shul. Some of us, it means getting to the dinner table. But Shabbat is coming whether or not we're prepared. So it's our responsibility then to agree to prepare and have that be a part of whatever our lives look like. Shabbat comes, the rest, and we don't have to earn it, right? So Shabbat, because it looks different for everybody, does not mean that we like rest doesn't need to be earned. It is built in for us. Does that make sense? Right? Because I think in our culture and our society, we have this idea that like unless we're productive, unless we've, checked everything off our to-do list, unless we've, done everything that needs to get done today, we can't lay down. We can't rest. And I don't know if that, but I think also there's this idea of like keeping up with the Joneses and making sure that we're doing what our Instagram lives tell us that we're supposed to do, or our internet live, there's this whole, all this stuff about, oh, I have to be this one presence here and this other presence here. But actually, what we've been given is the opportunity to stop and pause whether or not we finished our to-do list. I wind up on Friday afternoons with a checklist of things I certainly haven't finished. Anybody else, same, right? It's the same. I mean, we wind up with, and when I go to bed at night, it's the same thing, right? But I deserve to sleep. That's how it works, right? This rest is built into our tradition. So, this idea that Judaism is a religion of time speaks to me so deeply as somebody who has the honor to be with people as they die, as they transition into the next life, and helping families go through the difficult process of grieving and of ritualizing grief. I find this to be true. Judaism is a religion of time. So another piece of this is our grief rituals, right? As Jews, we bury quickly. We do this for a number of reasons. The number one thing being we want to be able to care for the living who are grieving their passing of those who have died. We also don't embalm. Traditionally, that's not the way that we handle a body. We hold it sacred, and so we don't have the luxury of time in that space. Also, often we bury quickly because a holiday is coming. We can't do the work of burying on a holiday, so there's that. It's one of the things that I think is so deeply incredible about what we do in our grief rituals, because I also work with family. We are lucky to have a ton of interfaith families, and people will reach out to me who are saying, "Oh, I'd like to do a funeral for my mom. She died, 3 months ago." I'm like, what have you been living in that liminal space? That person's not buried yet. That doesn't, this gives us a sense of what we're supposed to do next. And I think all of us know in grief, right? We get the grief fog. We're just wandering zombies a lot of times. We just don't have the capacity to know what is supposed to come next, because it feels like so much. And even if we are, every situation, of course, is different, but people who are pre-grieving, people who, are caring for their loved ones with Alzheimer's, like those things that the pre-grief, the illnesses, those things also carry a lot of depth. And then once you've hit the time where you have to do the next piece of it, you don't always know what's next. So Judaism gives us this outline because it's hard to know how to feel when we're living in that space, when we're so deeply devastated, or, when we're feeling more complicated feelings about things. So at a funeral is our responsibility is to honor the dead in order to care for the living. This is something that my partner, Rabbi Dan Slipikoff, one of my study partners, will often say, right? The idea of a funeral, of course, is to honor the person who died, but more than that, it's to give the people who are living what they need. Literally, we say at the end of a funeral, Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch sha'ar avei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, as if we want the person to understand they are not alone at this moment when we're asking them to face the world, right? So we do a funeral at the very end after we've buried somebody. We send these mourners, if you've seen this, maybe you have, we make 2 lines of non-family and send the mourners through these 2 lines and give them these words of comfort. We are literally helping them to walk into the next part of their lives where they have to go get in their cars and move to the next piece, right? And then the question is, what is the next piece? Really, what's not on here is the meal of comfort, which is often the next piece right after a funeral. The idea that like a community will often show up for somebody with food and say, we know you don't really feel like eating, but we want you to know that we're thinking of you. And then Shiva, right? I think if you look at the word Shiva, the reason I put it in the Hebrew here is because it literally has the letter Shin, Vat, Ayin. Shiva means 7, right? The 7 days, right? We have this idea once again of 7 days of deep mourning. You don't really leave your house. You're sitting on a small chair on the floor sometimes. The idea that you are really immersed in your grief. And it's not your responsibility to welcome people into your home. Like, I mean, Shivas look different for every family, but this is one of those things. And then we have the next piece of time, which Shloshim are 30 days, which give us the opportunity to understand. It's almost like a halfway piece. Like, what do we do when we have to go back to work, but we're still deeply in pain? What do we do when, like, everybody's having a party and we're standing around like, oh my God, like, I can't believe we're even feeling any joy right now. The whole world feels like it's going on and I'm in this grief bubble. And then we come out of that slowly, and for the next 10 months, we say the Kaddish every day as a reminder of that connection as we try to reintegrate. And then, of course, yard sites and Yisker are moments in which we deliberately pause, light a candle, and say the words that we need to say to remember those people. Any questions about this? Thoughts, comments? Okay. So to me, this idea of how Jewish time is built is an important piece of how we mourn and grieve, right? Because it is easy to be overwhelmed by grief. It's easy right now, I think, to look at the world and feel completely on our backs, just totally overwhelmed by everything that is happening, that could continue to happen. Um, I don't know. If you're like me, like you're attached to your phone pretty often, and that's, news is constantly there, right? We're getting the newspaper, we're listening to NPR. It's constant. Whatever it is, the input is constant. Our trauma levels continue to increase, and we continue to carry around the grief that we all, individually have and that we collectively have as a society. And I think there's something really important about understanding what that looks like and how it feels. Um, and remembering that we deserve rest. And not only do we deserve it, we don't have to earn it. It just happens for us. I'm going to stop this for just a second. Um,
Can I,
yeah, please, Maggie.
I think there's something interesting about the idea that you're sort of saying you don't have to earn it, but you do have to choose to some degree, right?
Hmm.
You can make other choices. So
Right.
how do you make that choice?
Well, I think making other choices is actually a part of the way that people deal with or don't deal with grief, right? Like, I think we see often people, I mean, I don't know about you, but when you're confronted with something deep and heavy, oftentimes it's easier to keep being productive and keep going and not think, right? I mean, when somebody dies, for example, one of the things that we often see is like you have to settle their estate and deal with that piece of it. And so the motions of going from one thing to the next can keep you from feeling all the feelings, which can be a good coping mechanism for a while. But I think unless we choose rest, unless we make the choice to figure out a way to pause, even if it's throughout the day, right? I don't think it has to look like, oh, take a 2 week vacation. That's not what I'm asking us to do here. I'm just thinking about like, what if you took 3 minutes and put down your phone and took some deep breaths, right? I find I get overwhelmed easily with the idea of like, okay, I'm not doing it right. So what does that mean, right? What does it mean not to do rest correctly? I'm not doing the phone. I'm using my phone before I go to bed, or I'm whatever it is. We have this in our world, this idea that like you're not doing it right, and that puts us into the trauma. It tells us that we're not good enough or we're not doing enough. It feeds into the narrative. So for me, throughout the day, it's a 3 minute break. I set a timer and breathe. Maybe it's even if that's too much, maybe that's too much. That's acceptable. One breath, right? One of my favorite teachings is, oftentimes we see Yud Hey Vav Hey, God's name, as mistranslated as Yahweh, right? But when you look at Yud Hey Vav Hey, we don't know how to pronounce that. We've never been given that, so we say Adonai. But really, if you were trying to pronounce it, it would be like, that's breath. Every deep breath, every breath is a connection with God. So maybe it's something that simple. I believe Rabbi Ron Simons taught me that many, many years ago. Um, so I'd like to give him his full due. But that's something that I talk about because, people ask that question. Okay, well, if you worship Yahweh, what does that mean? No, it's you. It's breath. It's breath. So, um, I, I also think that like, I don't know, those of us who are, if you read a scientific article, you go online, you whatever, you're always being told like, this is the next big thing. It's important to remember that much of those news outlets, those things that we use to get the information we need are often, um, they rely on us being sucked in and reading over and over and staying engaged in order to continue to make money. So it's important for us um, to really step back and make sure that we're understanding that part of that is like the news cycle is supposed to feed into this idea of enhancing our trauma so that we continue to rely on it. So I want to share with you, I'm not going to share much, but this book that I love, which is called Rest is Resistance. It's by Trisha Hersey. It's called Rest is Resistance, a manifesto by Trisha Hersey. And I'll show you the name at the end so you can write it down if you'd like. But she calls herself the nap bishop. She comes from the Black Christian church, and her thing is rest is resistance is a liberatory policy. It is what gives people the ability to step outside of the machine and look around. She literally hosts like naps for people online. Like it's one of the things, one of her ministry things that she does. And, while I don't agree with all of her takes on everything, just like anybody that you read, I have found her idea that rest is resistance to be a freeing one because I am somebody who really dives into that idea that if I'm not productive, I'm not good enough. Right? That idea that productivity is the end all be all of how we live our lives. So while she is not Jewish, she leans heavily on the idea of the Shemitah year and the Yovel, the 49 years, and she talks a lot about the Sabbath. And to me, there's something that says what our responsibility to ourselves is to find that religion of time, the sanctification of time, and to rely on that. So, the question, Maggie, that you asked, like, what do we do? My question was, what is really rest? Right? If you're gone for 2 weeks, but you're on the phone the whole time, or you're, I often, with one of my colleagues, I talk about the idea of tapping the brake throughout the day, so you don't have to pull the emergency brake. I think, and Shabbat gives us a little bit of an emergency brake, but that's built in. The idea that if you tap the brake throughout the day, you don't have to feel like you need a 2-week vacation. I mean, everybody needs a 2-week vacation, and certainly as it gets darker, we should all go find somewhere warm if that's your thing. But like, we don't necessarily need to pull the emergency brake if we're working on that stop throughout the day and revitalizing ourselves with that kind of peace. And Judaism gives us that too, by the way, because every time that we do something, we are supposed to say a bracha. We're supposed to say, thank you, God, for whatever, right? Before we eat a piece of bread, we have a blessing for that. Before we, eat a snack, we have a blessing for that. After we go to the bathroom, we got a blessing for that. You get a blessing, you get a blessing. It's a very Oprah vibe, right? But we're looking at this as this is also built into Jewish time. So we have the capacity and the capability to pause for gratitude and rest, and that is rejuvenating. Thoughts about this? So I guess my final question to us is this one. When the world and our grief and our trauma all feel so big, what is our responsibility? And not just our responsibility to ourselves, but our responsibility to the people that we love and care for. What is our responsibility? And I'm curious about knowing what Judaism teaches us in all of the different ways that it does. I'm curious about what you all are thinking as to what our responsibility is here.
And I think that you've primed us that our responsibility can be rest.
Mm-hmm.
We've definitely
Sure.
that question.
Mm-hmm.
And Recoroon here that as we think about the Shemitah year in Pittsburgh in the wake of the loss, how could we meet our responsibility or how might our grieving change?
Mhm. I
Which
think
I
those
think
are,
is, like, so what's our responsibility in that way to our individual self as well as our collective self?
yeah. I mean, I'm curious what you all think. As we mentioned before, our grief, it, it looks the same size, but I think we change, and therefore we have like as we expand our capacity, that's part of our responsibility, I think, right? To be able to understand that, like Maggie, what you guys are doing at the Healing Partnership, that happened out of the need for people to hold their to widen their containers, right? To hold one another in community. That's the other thing about all of these Jewish rituals is none of them allow us to really be isolated and alone. Our responsibility is to one another. And so perhaps, I mean, I think rest is one of our responsibilities, absolutely. But I also think another one of our responsibilities is to reach out and maintain our connections, or to grow them, or to lean into whatever that looks like, depending on where we are in our lives and in our world, you know? Um, that's I think, a piece of this for sure. Parents, what do you think about the question that you asked? This is my favorite thing to do. I learned this technique from a certain law professor. What are your thoughts about this 7 years later?
I guess as a person who was deeply affected, as many people on here are,
Mhm.
still are, by the 1027 events, I've been grateful to see the community expanding, not, of course, not forgetting, but thinking in terms of greater applicability of the lessons we learned for other communities. I see Maggie and many of her colleagues
Mhm.
going outside of Pittsburgh, many of the surviving members of the attack and family members. I know they're traveling outside of Pittsburgh and doing work in other communities that have suffered the same way. It's just mind-boggling to know that there's so many communities who've been affected by mass violence. I
Mhm.
see them taking the lessons that we have learned, talking about the ways that we have pulled together and bringing all of that to other places and other people who need it so much. And that's a way I think of that container expanding. So we have our grief, but we
Mhm.
can do more with it to help
Mhm.
others.
Yeah.
Alicia, I would just add that I learned from you about Shemitah and a 7-year rest when you told me several years ago that it was actually the Jewish Shemitah year. So
Mhm.
there's the calendar Shemitah, right? And it comes along. And then it seems to be that you're saying that there's a Shemitah rest after an incident 7 years. So is it both? And it did help me because I was at a transition point in
Right.
my life.
Well, I think, Ma, it's a great question. The reality is that the Shemitah year fall is a calendrical experience, right? The 7 years is 7 years. But I think that we can take that, just like what we do with so much of our Judaism and so many pieces of our experiences, and apply it in a way that allows us to experience that Shemitah, that rest this year. Or after 7 years after a big event or something. I think it's also important to remember that, um, you know, the Yovel, the 49th year, was often the year of the huge liberatory experiences. But every 7 years, we got a chance to check in and pause and really think about the rejuvenation of ourselves and of our land and of the people surrounding us. Um, Dad, I mean, that's one of those things that I am so grateful for. The fact that we have been able to, we like that those of us who have been through this kind of grief can help others through their experiences. Like the 1027 partnership stuff helped me a lot when we went through the tragedy that we went through up by us. Like we had a unfortunate shooting of a family near that belonged to our synagogue. And so I knew that there were resources that I could reach out to, places that I could go. That to me is the expansion of that container, right? And understanding that 7 years later, it's not our responsibility to put down the grief. I don't think that grief, we don't put it down, but we do find other ways to sort of adapt, and rest is one of those ways. Which we, by the way, which we can learn from our tradition. Other thoughts? I'd love to hear anybody else have other thoughts they want to share.
One of the things we often talk about is vicarious resilience, like learning from other people. So I'm kind of curious if anybody's ever made an intentionality for letting down some burden at year 7 of something.
This is, Maggie, is what we were just talking about. Like it's a calendrical experience, but this is the way that we can apply it. I mean, for me, it's that I will literally go on a sabbatical, right? After 7 years of serving at Shir Tikva in 2027, I will take a couple of months and literally go on sabbatical. By the way, same name, comes from the same experience. And my intention there will be to recharge and rest. Hi, Rabbi Klein. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Rabbi Harris. Thank you so much. And first, I want to give you a Yeshar Kochech for your teachings today.
Toda rabba.
I was just thinking for a second about the word Shemitah itself.
Mhm.
And so I was looking up the Shoresh, just thinking about the letters, Shin, Mem, Tet, and just kind of thought about it in terms of how do you connect between grief and resilience? And the letter Shin, the actual letter Shin, means literally like a tooth in Hebrew, like Shinayim, right? But spiritually, it stands for, just like we lose like a baby tooth and then we grow another tooth. There's something else that kind of comes in and takes its place. It's a sense of transforming. So Shin is like a sense of transformation. And the Mem is kind of something that oftentimes represents water, like Mayim, but it also kind of presents the sense of something flowing. And the Tet is significant for Tov, like goodness. So I was thinking about Shemitah, the essence of how rest can take us through this transformative need to move from to goodness, loving kindness that we can add into the world, kind of can take away some of the grief that we have pent up in us. So I think Shemitah is a tremendous concept that can move us from grief to a sense of goodness. So it's kind of
Thank
a
you.
teaching today.
I love that. Thank you so much. That idea that we build resilience through this rest and that it's good. I think it can be painful to be in grief and feel that way. And how do we do it correctly? Or how do we make sure that we connect? But that idea that it gives us this goodness is really, I'm going to keep thinking about that, Rabbi Klein. Thank you. I love exploring the roots of a word. It's one of my favorite activities because it just unlocks some keys for us. Thank you.
I love the visual that you just painted also, Rabbi Klein. I feel like if you could do some visual to go with it, if there was some art to go with that sort of transformation and the movement piece, thank you. That'd be great.
Maybe I'll have the grandkids work on some pictures for that one.
That would be a neat thing to do, to get different interpretations by teaching about the letters.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Harris.
It's my pleasure and honor to be a part of this with you.
Thank you. And one of our rituals is we do say the Kaddish D'Rabbanan. We acknowledge, and just like we talked about there, that there's a prayer for everything, and the prayer, in some ways, to take a pause and a rest for the gratitude of learning, and not just learning, but learning in community with other people. And so, Hannah, are you okay to do it? Okay, good. So Hannah Kay has agreed to do it and has done it every year. So I am really grateful to be able to have her do it with us today. And I believe, rabbis, you can correct me, you can rise if that's your ritual. Is that correct on this?
Mhm. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so please, why? I want to share my screen, but I'm also now having technical difficulties. Oh, there we go. It's contagious, apparently.
That's just hanging out with Shir Tikva is what that is.
Okay, so I will, and you can mute yourself just so that we only hear Hannah's voice, because otherwise it can be overwhelming. Go ahead, Hannah.
Okay. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ביעמה דברך ירתה וימליך מלכותה, בחייכון ובמייכון ובחיי תכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתנמם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי קדושה ברכו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמריam ביעמם ויאמרו אמן. על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידיכון ועל כל תלמידיכון ועל כל מען דעסקין באורייתא, די באתרה הדין ודי בכל אתר ואתר. יהי לכון ולכון שלמה רבה, הינה וכיסדה ורחמין, וחיים ארכים ומזוני רווחי ופרקנה, מן קדם אבוכן, די בשמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרמיו, הוא ברחמין יעשה שלום אלוהי ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Thank you all, and I hope the rest of your day is beautiful. And I
Thank you,
really
Maggie.
appreciate